Welcome back, everyone. My name is Eric Fisher, longtime advocate of indoor athletics, jumping into a powerful episode today. Some difficult topics in a lot of ways, but hoping that this conversation can help us, all of us, including three of us at the table, move from darkness to light. And with us today, we have Carrie Norvell, a community education coordinator at the Child Advocacy Center of Rutherford County, and our founder, Joel Bigelow. So just to get this conversation started, jump right into the weeds. Carrie, what do you do and why is it important?
First I want to say thank you for having me today. We really appreciate it. But I teach adults in our community the 5 steps to protecting children from child sexual abuse through a program called Darkness to Light. So we cover the facts about child sexual abuse, ways to minimize opportunity for those interactions to happen, how to talk to children about their bodies, sex, and boundaries, ways to recognize the signs, and then how to react responsibly if a child were to disclose abuse to you. Because, a lot of times we don't know how we would respond in those
Mhm.
situations. And I think it's really important for us to know how to. So,
Yeah. So at first, I mean, there's probably a range of reactions to that topic. Maybe just uncomfortable, want to keep it at arm's length, doesn't apply to me, or don't want it to apply to you, whatever it
Mhm.
is. So what you mentioned some stats. What are those stats to kind of shed some light on why this is a topic of conversation that we need to be having?
yeah, for sure. So, unfortunately, we know that 1 in 10 children will be the victim of child sexual abuse before their 18th birthday.
Stop
Um,
right there. Say that one more time
yes.
for the
So,
people in the back that didn't hear that.
yeah, 1 in 10
Mm.
children will be the victim of child sexual abuse before their 18th birthday. I like to break that down to be a little bit more personal to the community that we're currently in. So we know that the average class size of a Murfreesboro City School classroom is approximately 20 students.
Mhm.
So that means that 2 students in every single classroom could be the victim before their 18th birthday. We actually saw a 16% jump in cases between 2020 and 2021. So that means that 16% more than we had before the year
So,
the year before.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So, that was COVID year, right?
Yes.
So, without the kids being in school, which we know that the teachers and the counselors are overseeing the kids, right? We've always had that fear of like if the kids aren't in school, who's going to watch them? Who's going to, you know, um, let us know about abuses and potential abuses and different things. Who was that? How did you guys in the pandemic and then seeing that increase? Who was the reporting? I guess is what I'm saying. Like who? y- Am I making sense?
How
Yes.
do we
Yeah.
document that increase?
That's a
Yeah.
Yeah.
really great question. I think that the pandemic actually shed a lot of light on who makes the report, and we
Okay.
learned that teachers make 54% of our
Wow.
reports, which I think is why we saw that increase because children stopped going to school.
Yeah.
They stopped having that person there to advocate for
Mm-hmm.
them. So I don't really have a good answer on who exactly was making the reports in the absence of the teachers. We just know that when kids went back to school, they then had that person that they knew, hey, I can trust this person. Hey, I
Mm-hmm.
can tell them. Or even teachers are often trained to see those signs. Like we said, they're with children for a good majority of the
Mm-hmm.
day, right? So they're going to see those behavior changes and they're going to be more likely to ask questions because they know that, hey, they're not acting normal.
Mhm.
So maybe the increase was with the teachers when they came back to school, when they transitioned from the at home, went back to school, and then seeing the teachers, I guess is what I'm saying, can still be the ones reporting that 16% increase. But there was definitely a time period that nobody kind of knew what was going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
And how'd you guys approach that as advocates for the kids? Like, was there anything that you guys did during the pandemic, during that period of like, how do we how do we do something if nothing's being seen?
Yeah, so that's also a great question. Like I mentioned, I've only been with the Child
Sure.
Advocacy Center for about a year, so I didn't get to see, what it was like in the thick of it, right? Like, so I did not have the opportunity to see exactly how that was handled. I do know that we really advocate for that education, for educating adults on these
Okay.
things. So we did make Darkness a Light available through virtual trainings.
Okay.
We know that people were not willing to go out. We understand that, and that's why we worked towards that.
So working through virtually to be able to offer that and keep. Well, through that, did you guys see an increase? Did you guys see an increase of other adults wanting to take the initiative to learn more, that they can be advocates in their own circle of life?
Yeah, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, I think we all saw struggles everywhere,
Yep.
and we did kind of see that number drop off. But we're really hopeful because we're actually working back towards raising the number. We have a goal to train 10% of the adult population of Rutherford County.
Okay, where are we now?
Since 2012, we've trained about 13,000 people.
Wow.
And so that's really hard to tell you like what percentage that is of Rutherford County.
Because
What is the statistic? We have like 20 people moving into Rutherford County every
day.
single day.
Yeah,
So that
wow.
number is constantly growing
Mhm.
for us, which is great.
Yeah.
Like we want to train as many people as possible. But like I said, we are really working towards that. I think we've trained about 900 people since I've started in May. So that's a great number, in my opinion, personally. So
Yeah, I was trying to. The concept of education to me is obviously very intriguing, and there's a couple of different levels to that. One, the organization I would imagine exists to protect the children that are going either have gone through it or trying to stop anything from happening in the future, right? So that's one aspect of it. The other part is equipping the adults of the community, as you say, we're reaching for 10%, so that we can recognize these signs collectively as a community and have advocates that are proactively looking and helping and looking out. In your role as an educator, what is your philosophy and is information enough, or what is the next? It's one thing to speak to a group or even give
Mhm.
a module of education to somebody, but what's after that? How do we grow collectively toward this light initiative?
yeah, that's a really great
Is-
question. Did you have something you wanted
No,
to
I just wanted to agree. I understand exactly what he's saying, and it is a
Yeah.
good question because
Yeah.
I went through the training 7 years ago, and I feel like I'm trained, but 7 years I'm not. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you lose those pieces but it's so heavy.
Right.
I don't know if I want to go through it again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's a really great question. So, the National Children's Alliance has a theme for this year for Child Abuse Prevention Month, and it's your business, right? So I really love that because I think a lot of times we are in this mindset of that's not my kid, that's not my business,
Mhm.
right? Or I kind of think something might be going on. I don't know the full details, so I'm going to leave it
I'd just
alone.
rather not.
Yeah.
Right?
even-
And I think a lot of people aren't aware of like laws in the state of Tennessee.
Yes.
Tennessee
Tell
is
'em.
Tennessee,
Tell 'em.
yeah, Tennessee is one of 18 states in the U.S. where every single adult is considered to be a mandated reporter. So
Mhm.
that means if you have disclosure, discovery, or suspicion of child abuse, you're bound by law to make a report. So we always say, hopefully that is enough for you, right?
Mhm.
That's enough to drive you to make that report. Because it is our responsibility. If we as adults don't protect children, who is, right?
Yeah.
It's really hard for us to put that responsibility on a child.
Mhm.
Part of that training is teaching children about those boundaries.
Mhm.
But again, like us as adults, we have to be aware of these things. And it is a heavy training, but I do think it's so useful.
Oh yeah.
Because you learn things that you wouldn't think of being
Mhm.
signs, or even, like I said earlier, the ways to react if a child were to disclose to you. Before this job, I would have had no idea what to do in that situation. I probably
Yeah.
would have panicked, right? And I
Yeah.
probably, being the person I would have called my mom crying, I don't
Yeah.
know what to do.
Yeah.
But now I know. Now I know if that situation ever occurs, how I'm supposed to react in those situations. So hopefully that kind of answered your
I think it
question.
does. Yeah, I'm a learner too. I want to try and figure out how we can collectively protect each other on any level of what that means. I think sometimes for me, anyways, when you're going through difficult topics or enlightening topics, whatever the topic, sometimes our tendency is to move toward individualized. Like you could very well interpret "it's your business" as go stand over there by yourself. as
Mhm.
opposed to a collective initiative to say we're all going to be held responsible to report these things or protect each other. Therefore, we feel welcome to. Some other episodes we talked about before is when a child, especially, but anybody, but a child especially has permission to dream, then realities become more reachable, right?
Yeah.
I think in this case, if we have permission to think about what the ramifications are and how we deal with kids or respond to kids or deal with each other and hold each other responsible, like I'm just fascinated, and I'm rambling a little bit on the collective responsibility as opposed to individual responsibility.
Mhm.
So I'm going to play a little bit of a pessimist here, not to detract at all from the mission, but what I'm trying to get at is 10% is our goal to educate 10% of the adults. That still leaves 90%. And if, to your testimony, before you knew this stuff, you would
Mhm.
have no idea what to do and perhaps freeze. That's a pretty common response. It's like,
Yep.
I don't know what to do. And what do I do with my hands? I'm just going to go on because my life is tough as it is. Right. So do you have any thoughts of how we can, in addition to educating people 10%, can we change the culture to shift to say, not only do I have a responsibility, but I can do it and it's going to be okay?
Yeah, so I think that that's where that community aspect comes into play. If we make a community effort to
Yeah.
work together, I think that makes a very big difference. There's a quote that I love, and it says, "No one has to do everything, but everyone has to do something."
Yeah.
By working together, I think that we can help to change that number, right? If we let people know that when they choose to make these reports, when they see these things and they speak up about it, that they're going to be supported in that, that's important. I think support itself is important, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like you said, if we as an individual go do that, it's going to be hard, right? But if we know that there's somebody that's going to back us up with that, that's really powerful,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, it's been 7 years since you took the training, right? So maybe even though you've taken it, you forget these little things. You can always reach out, right? So you could call us at the CSE and
Yep.
be like, I had a kid that disclosed to me. I don't really know if I responded in the right way. Can we talk through this, right? So we want to be there for you. But even, having these people who've taken it recently, maybe you can reach out to one of them and say, "Hey, what do you remember from this?"
Yeah.
Right? So we can just feed off of each other in those things.
Sure.
And then, we're always more than happy to train people who've already been trained, right? Because we
Mhm.
want people to be prepared. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think what's unfortunate, to kind of what I was getting at a little bit, is sometimes an issue is not important until it's important to you.
Mhm.
So if it's not in your backyard or in your home, or it's hit you across the face, we might be tempted to just not care, which
yeah.
is really unfortunate human characteristic. But what I really appreciate about this current conversation right now is we have the founder of an organization that it does hit home. It is important, and he's going to help communicate that message to his organization to say, not only is this important because it affects the people that we serve and we love, but also this is a standard of our organization to look out for each other.
Mhm.
So is there an effort, in addition to finding zealous believers already, they might respond to this and say, you know what, I've already cared about that and I'm going to join in. Those are easy, right? You get those people that go fight for you, and that's awesome. But is there a kind of directive, in addition to the darkness to light, to find leadership teams of people, organizations, of churches, of communities, and say, this is why you should care about this? Is there
Yeah.
something along those lines?
Yeah, so that's essentially part of my job is
Okay.
reaching out to those people, right? So I try to tailor that message to them. This is why it could be important to you, right? So we do train churches, business groups. We really take pride on the fact that we offer this training free to anybody in our community, right? Because we want to get that information
Mhm.
out. So we do make an effort to really reach out to them. Yes, we do have those people who say, "Oh, I don't have the time right now,"
Sure.
or they probably are sitting there thinking, "I don't need to take this because it's not happening." But unfortunately, we know that there's not a perfect offender and there's not a perfect victim, right? It happens in any
Mhm.
race, age, gender, socioeconomic situation. It happens everywhere.
Yeah.
An offender is going to be where children are because that's that's where they want to be, and the thing is they build trust of that child and of the parent because they want that in. 90% of child sexual
Yes.
abuse victims know their abuser.
Yes.
That's a
Yes.
terrifying statistic,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
like you said, we think this isn't personal to me, but it could be personal to
Sure.
you, right? So even if it's not happening to your child personally, it could be happening to one of your children's friends, right? So you think if you have one kid and they have 9 friends, chances are that 1 out of their 10 friend group could be the
Mhm.
victim, right? And I think that that's just eye-opening to think even if it's not your kid, it could be somebody close to home. So,
Yeah.
So outside of your guys' education piece that you do, there's a lot more that goes into your guys' agency. Can you speak a little bit more about what that looks like as far as like I've off air I was telling you, like I've been there, I've been through the building, the one-way glass, and just a little bit more of I guess the deeper stuff, when the child comes in there and how you guys kind of handle that.
yeah, so that's a really good question. So if I didn't mention before, we work with victims of child abuse and child sexual abuse. So here in Rutherford County, we have what's called SIPIT. That's our Child Protective Investigative Team.
Okay.
So we work with law enforcement, DCS, the district attorney, us at the CAC, and then a place called Our Kids who does the medical exams
Okay.
to work those child abuse cases, right? So I like to say that we all play a little piece of the puzzle when it
Mhm.
comes to those cases. And our piece is what's called a forensic interview, right? So when a child's just lived through abuse, they've just lived through a significant amount of trauma, right? So before CACs, it was like the kid would go tell their teacher. The teacher would be like, okay, you need to go tell the counselor. The counselor's like, okay, go tell the principal. The
Yeah.
principal's
Right.
like, okay, let's call a police officer, and then they talk
Yeah.
to the police officer. They've just had to share their story so many times,
Mhm.
right? And that's got to be overwhelming, which is kind of why CACs were created. So we now have a trained professional who goes through extensive training to know those age appropriate questions to ask. That child gets to come in, sit down with a person whose job is to listen, right?
Mm.
So they know how to do that. And we even see kids sometimes who come in and we have a forensic interviewer. Her name's Elizabeth, and I love this. She says, they come in and we have kids who say, nobody's believed me. Nobody believes my story. But Elizabeth sits there and she listens and she lets them know that she believes what they're saying,
Yeah.
right? And she can just visibly see this weight that's been lifted
Oh,
off
yeah.
their shoulders
Yeah.
when they walk out, right? So that's what we do. We record that forensic interview and it's used throughout the entire prosecution process, right? So they only have to share the story
One
once.
time.
One time, and they don't have to sit in a courtroom in front of their abuser and tell it, right? It's that one time. So that's the big thing that we do at the CAC is that forensic interviews. We also have family advocacy. So while the child's going through that interview, we have somebody that sits down with the family, talks about victims' rights, therapy, counseling, walks them through the forensic interview process. I think a lot of times that's really intimidating for a parent to come in and say, what is happening with my kid right now,
Mhm.
right? Because they're already overwhelmed as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
So they get to talk to that family advocate about what's happening. We have a bilingual family service coordinator. So she essentially does every job of the CAC, but in Spanish and English.
Mhm.
So she's a superstar. And then we have a drug endangered children's coordinator. So he works with families who've struggled with addiction in the past to connect them with resources in our community. So essentially, anything that they need, he's going to do what he can to connect them with the right people. So maybe relapse prevention, parenting skills, budgeting skills. Maybe they need to know how to apply for food stamps. He's going to help them in those ways. He does in-home visits, so he works with the families and the children in those matters. So we have a really great team. They make me super proud to call them part of my team because I love what they do, and I love how they help children in our community on a day-to-day basis. So
Yeah, that's really amazing. So the rise to the call of action for the victims is powerful. I think it's poignant. We see the human spirit say, like, you know what, got you. We're going to help you out. The other side, and you said there's no perfect abuser and there's no perfect victim, right? So the other side that I think is interesting from community involvement and growth and education is the mental health and kind of, I guess, outreach to the abusers, whether they are prolific abusers or one time because of a variety of reasons, right? Is there anything that, and I don't know this, but is there anything that your organization does to kind of curb that behavior also from both sides, or do you have any thoughts about that?
So that's a really hard question. We
Sure,
don't
sure.
typically work with abusers in that aspect. When a kid comes in, let's say like mom or dad was the abuser, right? So at that point, mom and dad are not allowed in our building.
Yeah, yeah.
And we do that for a purpose because you think if a kid comes in to tell their story and they know that mom and dad, who's just abused them, is sitting in the waiting room, and they've said if you say anything, it's not going to go well
Right.
afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So we are really intentional about making our center a safe space,
Mhm.
right? We want them to know that they can share their story.
Yeah.
And as far as like speaking to abusers, you know, we like I said, we offer the darkness to light training to anybody.
Yeah.
And I think when you go through that training, you get the opportunity to see the effect that it has on a kid, right? So maybe as an abuser, you haven't considered what's happening, and what kind of lifelong effect it can have on somebody. And I think, if you went through that training, maybe it would make a difference. But I really don't have a great answer for that
Yeah, and I wasn't even
question.
asking
So
like from an outreach to abusers necessarily, because I don't sympathize with that, but much more of the I guess kind of fleshing out what you just mentioned is as we get closer and closer to 10% and beyond of educating people through darkness to light, there's probably a multifaceted outcome from that. One is going to be we're going to be good advocates to be able to help people, but also as individuals collectively in this community, we'll make better decisions as people because we understand all the ramifications of what's going on in our world. Is that accurate?
yeah, exactly. In that training, like I said, we talk about ways to minimize opportunity. Like I said earlier, 90% of child sexual abuse victims know their abuser. So we talk about minimizing those isolated one-on-one situations because about 80% of child sexual abuse cases happen in those isolated
Yeah.
one-on-one situations.
Talk more about what is an isolated one-on-one situation.
Yeah, so it's just the victim and the abuser. So the abuser has found that opportunity to be alone with that child, right? So that's what we consider a
Just-
one-on-one situation, those isolated one-on-one situations. So even just talking to children about boundaries that need to be in place.
Yeah.
I had somebody point this out the other day. A lot of times I think, especially here in the South, we raise
Yes.
children to respect their elders and to do as they're told, but we don't necessarily put a line on that, right?
Yep.
We don't
Mhm.
teach
Yep.
them that there's a line that doesn't get crossed, and we have to be intentional about doing that. Because there is a line that doesn't get crossed.
Yeah.
So letting them know that if somebody does cross that boundary, cross that line, that there is somebody that they can talk to, helping them to identify who that trusted person is for them, and then just being more alert and paying more attention to the people that we allow to come in contact with our children,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's just so important. If we're gonna have those situations where a kid needs to be with an adult, we want to, make it in a public place, a public library, a public park, right? Or have multiple adults supervise when we
Mhm.
can. So just making those situations what we call like observable and interruptible, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So
Makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
But because it's the same way with my kids, right? They have coaches that they respect. If the coach tells you to do X, Y, and Z, that's what you do. I have really good kids. They do what they're told, right? They stay in their lanes. So making sure that they know, like, hey, man, if something crossed this line, I mean, that there is a difference between that. You don't have to agree with everything your coach says, everything your teacher says, and just go on with it. And I think that's difficult conversation to have with your kids. And I don't think it's a one-time conversation that you have with your kids. It's a consistent, knowing who's around your kids, just knowing who they are and paying attention to your own kids too, for crying out loud, and putting your cell phones down and looking at your kids and talking to them about their day. Like you were saying earlier, you can feel, is something not right or something going on over here, or what does this look like and that look like? Talking about cell phones and social media, has the training or the awareness factor gone a little bit more on that platform? Is that a avenue of whatever for these scumbags? I mean, what?
Yeah, so the training
Sorry.
no. You're totally fine. I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes, so the training does take that opportunity to talk about online safety a little
Okay.
bit. But I think that a lot of things that we apply to like physical situations, we can also apply to online situations, right? So like if our kid's going to go out somewhere, we're going to be like, where are you going? Who are you
Yeah,
going
yeah.
with? How long are you going to be there, right? So we can have those same conversations with them
them.
about their online interactions, right? It's like what social media platforms are you on? Like who do you talk to on these platforms? What do you talk about? And letting them know that we don't need to have conversations with people we don't necessarily know, because we could make the smallest mistake as, they could say, "Hey, like I saw you used a Taylor Swift song lyric as one of your captions, right? Do you like Taylor Swift?" You'd be like, "Oh yeah, I love Taylor Swift," right? So they'll be like, "Oh yeah, me too." Right? So that was their
Oh
in.
yeah.
They
Yeah.
found that small
Oh,
thing that
mhm.
we would never consider to be an in as an in,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So just letting them know that we don't need to be sharing that personal information. If somebody messages us that we don't know, like let's just block them and cut that off, right? So they may say "Oh, that's so silly, like they're not going to hurt me." But we need to have those conversations, not necessarily like making them paranoid that there are.
Yeah, and there's a balance between that too.
Say, yeah.
Not
Yeah.
just oh, my dad won't let me do this or that, or
Right.
trying to balance that out that's tough as a parent. Allowing them to do things but still protecting, and like, I mean, it's a delicate dance.
Yes.
Because you want them to talk to you, you got to have that open relationship. But
Right.
if you're too much over them, they're not going to open up to you, because they're like, well, if I tell them this, then I'm definitely not going to be able to do that again. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yes.
parenting is tough.
Yeah, and one of the steps we talk about is like having those open and honest conversations with our children, because we know that our relationship with them is one of the best protective factors that
Yep.
we can have. There's a mom that told me this once, and I love this. She has a teenage daughter, and she said, if my daughter doesn't want to go somewhere, but she doesn't want to seem the bad guy, I let her place the blame on me. So we have a code word, right? She said, if my daughter ever texts me and says, "Can I pretty please spend the night at so and so's house?"
I'm out of there.
I know that that's her way of saying, "I don't
Yeah.
really want to do it. Mom, come save me."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So she's put that in place, right? So letting them know that if they're going through something, that they can talk to us, right? There's a man on one of the stories in our Darkness to Light training, and he talks about how he was in his mom and dad's bedroom once after he'd already been abused, and his mom literally says, "Now don't let anyone ever hurt you." Right? So she was trying to convey the right message. She just didn't do it necessarily in the right
Yeah.
way. So at that point, he thought, I've already made a mistake and I can't go and tell her about it. Even though we as bystanders know that that was not his fault, he kind of internalized that. So we just also have to be really intentional about the way we have those conversations, because that's important. Even letting kids know that they have authority when it comes to matters of their body, right? So if they don't want to hug somebody, they don't want to kiss somebody, we take no as an answer, right?
Yep.
And if we're at a family reunion and Uncle Joe wants a hug and he doesn't seem to take no as an answer, let them know that we're going to be their advocate, right? So we're going to step in at that point and say, "Hey, they said no. We're taking no as an answer," right?
Yeah.
So that's
That
just
communication
important.
is so huge, because there is a fine line. You don't want people living in fear of adults. That's not the intention. The intention is to know your boundaries. You know the communication is there. You have safe spaces at different locations, and you're just protecting yourself. So like these heavy topics sometimes can be, just beat you down, and darkness, but the darkness to light, that light is protecting and loving each other in a way that we can thrive, right? That's the idea. And I heard an analogy of a father that was a good painter, and he's painting the wall in his room, and his young son is not good at painting. So the kid wants to paint, and the father, in his response, was like, no, 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 you can't paint, because he's worried about messing up the wall.
Mhm.
The message that the kid hears is, I can't paint,
Yep.
and I don't have any place here. So like that idea of communicating in a way that is safe, it is open and honest, and is inclusive of the child, to say, you're with me, but I'm going to explain to you why it is that I'm doing it, is, I think, a huge step forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And I'll add this to that. That makes me think of a lady. She was talking about the conversation she has with her son, and I think she said he's like 4. They in the car practice telling adults no, right? So she's like, okay, in this situation, and this happens, what do you think your response is going to be? And he yells out no, right? Because in those moments, she makes him feel empowered to
Mhm.
tell
Yeah.
adults
Yeah.
no. So she feels like that has built confidence in him. So if he goes out and something actually happens where she's not there, he knows he can yell
Yeah.
no, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
he's asserting his dominance in that situation, right? So
Yeah.
I just think that's really powerful too.
Mhm.
So, hitting on a little bit of what Eric was saying, it's such a heavy topic and a dark topic, and bringing it to light. You work in this every day. How do you protect yourself? How do you keep yourself recharged? How do you still come out here with a smile and still advocate every day? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so that's a really hard question. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but we see like anywhere from 2 to 4 kids walk through our door every single day.
Mhm.
So that's like 50 to 60 kids every month, right? And people ask me like, how does that not get so heavy on you, right? But I think for me, I have the opportunity to look at the fact that I get the chance to hopefully make a difference, right? So, like, I get to go teach people how to recognize and respond to child sexual abuse. And I just live with the hope that they're taking that out there and doing something with it, right? So, even if one kid's life gets changed, that's like enough for me, right? So I don't have any kids of my own, so sometimes people think like, how can you tell me to do this with my kid? But I have 3 nieces and a nephew, and like I would die for them
Yes.
if it
Yeah.
had to come to that, right? Like
Yeah.
they might as well be my kids,
Yeah.
right? So I just think about them and the fact that like what would happen if I wasn't out there doing what I was doing? What would happen if people didn't know how to respond if they were in that situation? So I think that they kind of fuel me on some
Yeah.
things, like I want the world to be a better place for them. So I think that that's kind of the hope that I get to live with. I get to go home knowing that I got to make a difference somewhere.
Awesome.
That's
Awesome.
really cool. Yeah. Let's say in kind of wrapping up this particular conversation, we don't want to camp on education and information only. We want to point people to move, right, and to do things. So how can we find the Child Advocacy Center? How do we get to the darkness to light? What's the call to action here? We're getting people involved.
Yeah,
I have my
so
blue on.
yes, he
I'll give
wore
myself
his
the shout
There
out.
you go.
blue. So, like I said earlier, April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. So, blue is our color. You can use the hashtag #WearBlue2022, which is really catchy. But if you are interested in the training, we actually have a public training coming up at the end of this month at First Presbyterian Church of Smyrna. That's going to be on April 28th at 6 p.m.
Okay.
So that'll last about an hour, and we will cover those 5 steps. But maybe that doesn't work for you and you have a group that you want to get trained, you can always reach out to us. We love to hear when people want to be trained, right? So you can call the CAC at 615-867-9000, or go to our website, which is cacrutherford.org. We're also on Facebook as well. So all of our events for April will be on there, our contact information as well. But typically, you can just give us a call and they will you just say, "Hey, I want to talk to Carrie about darkness to light," right? And they'll direct that call to me, and we can sit down and talk about those things. So
Lastly, tell us about the walk coming up.
Yep.
yes. So we have our Hometown Heroes Walk for Children that's going to be on April 29th. So I think it's a little bit over 2 mile walk. So we
Mhm.
walk from Civic Plaza in Murfreesboro back to the CAC. We will have a free lunch available after that walk as well. We just really ask that you pre-register so that we know who will be there. But you can register day of. Registration starts at 10:30. Our walk starts at noon. But we use that walk as an opportunity, first off, to raise awareness, but second off, to essentially thank our hometown heroes, right?
Mhm.
Who work every day to help protect the children in our
Oh,
community.
yeah.
So I just think that that's a really neat event because we get to say thank you to
Yeah.
those people, right? Those
Mhm.
people who maybe sit, what we'd say like behind the curtain and do some of the heavy lifting that people don't get to see on a day-to-day basis. So I just think that's a really neat event. It's also a fundraiser event because we will have t-shirts for sale and a silent auction. So you can find all that information, like I said, on our website or on our Facebook page.
Awesome.
There you have it. So, I mean, this has been awesome. Really, thank you so much for coming in. And I just want to again charge the listeners. There's things to be done if we want to change the world for the better.
Yep.
That's the simple call to action. If you want to be a guardian and advocate for people that you love and care about, this is one avenue to do it, and we should do it. I'm inspired. I want to jump on board with the training if it makes sense, or it does make sense. Try to get it into the schedule. That's what I mean,
Mhm.
and go from there. So please get those resources. Go reach out to the CAC, and let's make a positive change. Thank you so much, Carrie, for coming and being a part of this conversation. And I hope it's just a catalyst for more and more really good conversations to come. And thank you, Joel, of course, too.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.